put us in a box. Go ahead. That just gives us something to break out of. Because the next generation 2025 GMC Terrain Elevation is raising the standard of what comes standard. As far as expectations go, why meet them when you can shatter them? What we choose to challenge, we challenge completely. We are professional grade. Visit GMC.com to learn more.
She's made up her mind to live pretty smart. Learn to budget responsibly right from the start. She spends a little less and puts more into savings. Keeps her blood pressure low and credit score raises. She's cutting debt right out of her life. She tracks her cash flow on a spreadsheet at night.
Boring money moves make kinda lame songs, but they sound pretty sweet to your wallet. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865.
I have 3 young kids, 10, 8, and 2 years old. And one of the big things I've learned since becoming a parent is that little kids lie. Not sometimes, like all the time. And they're usually not even very smart about it. It's like everyday things. I'll ask one of them, "Did you clean your room?" And they'll say yes. And then I'll walk into the bedroom and it hasn't been cleaned. So, okay. When stuff like that happens, I'm like, do you think I'm dumb? Do you think this is going to work out for you? And I've been feeling that a lot lately, not just in my personal life, but working on this show, covering the news, especially out of Washington. If you hadn't been paying attention, last week, there were a lot of these moments where I was just like, really? I talked to David Graham from The Atlantic about the recent whirlwind of gaslighting coming from the White House.
Last Thursday, we saw this story first on the Washington Post about the Smithsonian removing references to Trump's 2 impeachments.
The exhibit, which was last updated in 2008, looks at presidential impeachments over history.
The following day, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting announced that it would shut down.
The announcement comes less than 2 weeks after President Donald Trump signed a bill that will cut $1.1 billion for CPB.
The same day, he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics simply because he was upset that the numbers were not as good as he wanted them to be, and it called into question his stewardship of the economy.
Friday's report showed just 73,000 jobs added in July, well below expectations, and included sharp downward revisions for May and June.
The following day, the Senate confirmed Judge Jeanine Pirro as the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. This is somebody who was pulled off the air on Fox after the 2020 election, apparently because people at Fox thought that she was going to say things that were false.
As for Pirro, she is a close friend of the president and is known for having repeatedly pushed conspiracy theories about voting in the aftermath of Trump's 2020 election loss.
And then right after that, we learned that the administration is trying to go after Jack Smith, the former special counsel, under the Hatch Act, alleging that by trying to prosecute Trump for both the subversion of the 2020 election and for hoarding documents at Mar-a-Lago. So in other words, for doing the job he was appointed to do.
The agency typically investigates federal employees and oversees complaints from whistleblowers. It does not normally investigate former government employees, and it's unheard of for it to probe the actions of DOJ prosecutors.
Again, we saw all of this happen in a week.
I mean, I was just boggled to see all of these things in such a short time. And I know these are kind of, Trump does these sorts of things all the time, but it was just such a striking confluence to me.
The firing of Dr. Erica McInterfer, the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, may have gotten the most media attention just because it was so brazen. These jobs numbers came out that Trump didn't like, and so he fired her.
Mr. President, why did you fire the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Because I think her numbers were wrong. Just like I thought.
I'm starting to get that feeling like maybe the bedroom hasn't been cleaned.
He's also making false claims about the kind of data coming out of BLS. So we saw these serious downward revisions last week in recent months, but he claims that, they were trying to help Biden. This isn't true. There was a huge downward revision in August 2024. So none of this really matches the pattern of bias. And there's no evidence that any of this is, these numbers are not real. It's a total lie.
It's like getting a bad weather forecast and then firing the weatherman. It's not going to change the fact that it might rain later. To me, I'm reading these numbers, I'm reading these adjustments. It's like an economic forecast, right? And it all seems like it's pointing to growing signs that Trump's economic policies are leading us somewhere uncertain, but it might not be readily apparent right now.
Yeah, I've seen, this is like a boom time for economic historians, I feel like, who are pointing out all of the examples of people trying to, leaders trying to fire statisticians and then finding that that doesn't actually change reality. You can change the numbers, but you can't change what people are seeing around them. If people are seeing higher costs, if they're struggling to get a job, they're going to know that, and they're not going to take his word for it.
Today on the show, how long can the Trump administration keep making stuff up? I'm Rob Gunther, filling in for Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
Let's play Burlington's Guess That Price. Back to school means back to saving. We're bringing you kids' jeans starting at, hold on a minute, just $11.99. Burlington's acing this test. What about character backpacks? We've got them starting at $12.99. Burlington's done it again. How about sneakers for the kids? A-plus brands and right on trend starting at $11.99. Saving is now in session. Burlington, deals, brands, wow! Styles and selections vary by location.
Gatorade is the #1 proven electrolyte blend designed to hydrate better than water. So you can lose more sweat and raise your game. Gatorade, is it in you?
We had big news last week. Donald Trump fired the Commissioner of Labor Statistics. Can you tell me about this position and tell me about this bureau? Because I'll be honest, I can't say if I've ever really heard of this particular government agency before Friday, but it's clearly important. So what do they do, and why is this a huge deal?
The premise of something like the Bureau of Labor Statistics is pretty simple. We, as a country and policymakers, need to have effective numbers about what is going on in the country. And that's important for sort of democratic accountability, for people to choose the policymakers they want. And it's important for policymakers to be able to make good decisions, whether that's the Fed or the Treasury Department or members of Congress. They need to know what's actually going on. And so they need numbers that are reliable, that are gathered by career statisticians in the civil service, not people who are political appointees chosen for their political affinity. And so that's the promise of BLS. And that's the way BLS has worked for a long time. You've occasionally gotten people claiming that the numbers are cooked, but it's very rare, and no one has taken that seriously until now. Whether Trump believes this or not is unclear, but he forces Republicans to kind of pretend that they believe it as well so they can be in line with him. And I would say that any country that is focusing this intently on something like the Bureau of Labor Statistics is probably not in great shape, either politically or economically. The one time I remember it being a major story in the past was during the first Obama administration, when the country was in recovery from the Great Recession, was attempting to recover. And it was like every month leading up to the 2012 election, when the numbers came out, it was a huge story. What will the numbers be like? And, does that mean Obama will win, or does that mean Romney will win? And that went away. And the fact that we're back in the situation is a sign, I think, of weakness in the economy.
Why is there so much focus on the fact that these numbers are regularly adjusted? You see the administration really clinging onto this fact that the numbers change from month to month. Is there any validity to the fact that maybe we shouldn't be putting so much of an emphasis on preliminary numbers if they're going to change a couple months later?
I guess it's fair to say that it's weird to see revisions. Like, it's a little bit jarring because we do, and I think this is partly the fault of the media, we take these numbers when they come out as though they are hard fact. And then a few months later, they may be revised up, they may be revised down, or they may have nailed it. And the reason is it's hard to get these numbers right. The BLS does the best work it can, and sometimes it gets these things wrong, and that's why it has to check its work. And that's something that should be celebrated. Like, that's a sign of reliability, but it is also disorienting. I do think we should probably be more careful about, treating these numbers as though they are the final word, but also they're the numbers we have, and so they're what we have to go with. I do think it lends itself to partisan attacks, and we have been lucky in the past that most people have not bought into those partisan attacks, and now that maybe is changing.
Yeah, if you go back to that adjustment that we were talking about earlier, the one that Trump is claiming would have helped Biden, the numbers themselves aren't 100% positive. They show a loss. They just don't show as big of a loss. So I guess what I'm saying is you can frame these numbers any way you want to kind of tell a different story from moment to moment.
Yeah, and in fact, Trump could be doing that, but it's much easier, I think, for him to just fire somebody and claim that things are rigged than to try to tell a more nuanced story about the economy. And I don't think, he doesn't have, despite his business background, I don't think he has the economic literacy to really think through these things. And I'm not sure he understands really what the Bureau of Labor Statistics does, although I'm sure there are people around him who do.
Yeah, I mean, in his Truth Social post, in one of his Truth Social posts, talking about how these numbers were rigged, he also includes Jerome, quote, too late Powell as being no better. He wants the Federal Reserve Chair to lower interest rates. And I mean, I'm not an economics major either, but my understanding is that if you're looking to lower interest rates, wouldn't you want higher unemployment numbers?
Yeah, well, there's an interesting thing that Trump is doing here where he's on the one hand, the BLS is lying and the economy is actually really good. But also Jerome Powell isn't doing enough to help the economy and he needs to do these things. And those things, there's an obvious contradiction there, but that doesn't seem to bother him.
Yeah. He really does seem to be just like firing at the hip. And you could see this also in one of the other scandals you talked about at the National Museum of American History. There's apparently this exhibit on presidential scandals. And we're seeing Andrew Johnson, we're seeing Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton being included in this little infographic about presidents that have been close to getting kicked out of office. And surprisingly, Donald Trump is omitted. Tell me what happened.
So the Smithsonian has this exhibit as part of a sort of general presidential exhibition. And after Trump's impeachment, they added like a temporary thing that included those, because there hadn't been an impeachment since the 1990s until 2019. And then that disappeared, and it's a little bit unclear what happened. The Washington Post reports that this followed a review ordered by the administration to find bias in museums. The Smithsonian says that they were really just removing this because it was always meant to be temporary, and they're going to do a more permanent update that is coming soon. But it follows Trump, a pattern of Trump meddling with the Smithsonian. He's complained about things that take a negative view, in his opinion, of American history. The White House tried to fire the head of the National Portrait Gallery, which it didn't really have the power to do. We've seen the administration trying to crowdsource examples of negativity about American history from national park sites, which produces some kind of absurd situations. So he just, whether or not, regardless of what the facts are and what the history are, he just wants to get this sort of negativity out and turn everything into spin.
So I know I made it kind of a leap talking about economic data to talking about an exhibit from a museum, but I'm wondering if there is a connecting thread there that you think illuminates something bigger.
I mean, I think the connecting thread is that the facts, no matter what they are not important to him. What's more important is the spin. And so if the facts help him, that's great. And if they don't, then they just get shoved out of the way. And everything gets subsumed to this kind of narrativizing. He has a narrative of American history, which is really, ironically, it's sort of progressive. Like things are always getting better and things have always been good. And the same has to be true of the economy. The economy is great and getting better. Nothing else is permitted.
We're seeing what I perceive almost as a death by a thousand cuts type of situation where we have everything that you talked about before. We have the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. We have the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services cutting funding for mRNA research. We have the EPA saying that we can no longer regulate carbon dioxide because it's now classified as not a pollutant. Where are we supposed to put our focus when everything is happening from so many different sources?
I don't know. I think that's one of the things that's scariest about it. And we've seen lots of discourse about, Trump using things as distractions. And I think that is often the case. But the problem is that the things that he uses as distractions are often also really serious. And so figuring out where to look, I find, is really challenging. And the thing that I find distressing about a lot of this is, I mean, it's one thing to lie, which obviously all politicians or most politicians lie, and you can find lots of examples of that. But here we have an assault on, not just telling falsehoods, but an assault on, the gatherers of facts, on the systems that produce facts, and then on the transmission of facts through things like the Smithsonian, which is very important for public history, or through CPB, which is important for getting basic information to people. So it feels like he is at every stage in the process attacking the reliability of information. And that's really daunting.
You were seeing the consequences of this spillover outside of the executive branch. The New York Times had some reporting about how the judiciary is increasingly being distrustful of everything that's coming from the White House, from the Department of Justice, where my understanding is there used to be a lot of deference. There used to be a lot of trust. Prosecutors could come to judges, present their facts, and the judges would mostly accept that. Now we're seeing something different, a bunch of high-profile court cases where the DOJ has been caught kind of like stretching the truth to the judges. And my understanding is that the consequences of this could gum up how the federal government operates in court as well.
Yeah, I thought that story was really interesting. And, we have seen in the coverage these interesting exchanges between judges and Justice Department lawyers. And you sense that sometimes the DOJ lawyers are being sent out there, they're sort of being fed to the lions. They are not given reliable information. They're not given any information at all. And then they're going out and they're trying to explain these things to the judges. And the judges are understandably upset about that. We should not trust, whether that's the court system or we as citizens or just we as a nation, shouldn't trust the government implicitly. I think it's worthwhile to question authority. But there is a danger here of having no basic set of facts, no presumption on even some matters. And, the legal scholars say is everything will slow down so much. It will be impossible to get through cases because judges will feel like they have to press the government on everything they say. And you can't get to then, the things that are in dispute. There's the famous Daniel Patrick Moynihan quotation about how, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but they're not entitled to their own facts. But the idea now seems to be that you are entitled to your own facts. And in a world where, we see intense polarization, and not just polarization, but, hatred of the other party, hatred of the other. When you are resorting to your own facts, you are likely to sort of build those things up. You can build your own facts up about the other and about all kinds of things. They can have their own alternative fact universe. You lose the bonds of national cohesion. You lose the things that make us function as a country.
We'll be back after the break.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Change is always happening. But no matter what changes in 5 years, there's one thing that will stay the same: the price of your internet. With the Xfinity 5-year price guarantee, you get 5 years of the most reliable Wi-Fi, with our best equipment included, for a price that stays exactly the same. Restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees extra and subject to change. Most reliable Wi-Fi based on Open Signal Awards USA. Fixed Broadband Experience Report, August 2024.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
I remember during the George W. Bush administration, those officials were famously loose with the truth. And I'm probably putting that like a little too generously. There were lots of lies leading up to our war in Iraq. We've been dealing with the fallout for that ever since. I guess what I'm asking is what we're seeing with Trump, how new is it? Or is this just an escalation of something that sort of has been creeping up for a while?
Yeah, I think it is an escalation. I think you're right to put it in that lineage. I think you're right to say that we are still dealing with the effects of the Bush administration. But I think about something like, a major scandal of the Bush years was the idea that the Justice Department was firing U.S. attorneys because they wanted more politically pliable ones in place. This is a huge scandal. I mean, the Attorney General was forced to resign. There were congressional hearings. It was part of Bush's sort of slow slide into wild unpopularity. Mm-hmm. And I compare that to now when we're appointing Elena Haba, Trump's former personal attorney, as an acting U.S. attorney in New Jersey. We're appointing Jeanine Pirro, a Fox News host famous for boosting false claims about the 2020 election, to be the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. She's replacing Ed Martin, who was literally a lawyer for January 6th offenders, and who was using the office basically to go after political enemies. So although there's a connection, I think, in sort of disregard for truth, we have moved far beyond the kind of level of what was going on there. And things that were scandalous in the Bush administration, rightly, are like everyday stories in the Trump administration or in the second Trump administration. I keep waiting to see if we'll see the same kind of abandonment of Trump from at least some Republicans. There will be these stories where Republicans distance themselves from Trump and then kind of test the wind and then come back. But if the economy really does head in a bad direction and Republicans want to be reelected in 2026, what are they going to do? Are they going to try to distance themselves, or are they going to kind of lash themselves to the mast of the Trump administration? And I don't really know what to expect, and I have mostly learned better than to try to make predictions.
If you're making this case that eventually the truth will figure out a way to break through, does this moment feel unique? Does it feel like something's about to give, whether it's economic or political?
I think that we're about to get some actual results on the economy in a way that we haven't for a long time. Trump has been talking about tariffs for years, since the 80s, and he imposed some in the first term, but we're doing something different now. And so we're going to actually feel the effects of these. It will move from being a talking point to being a reality, and then we're going to get the feedback. And I think that's going to be valuable. I don't know how quickly that will matter politically. And one thing I think I have learned is that there is no one thing that ever hurts Trump so much that it takes him out. But we saw over the course of the first term, the gradual accretion of negative stories, of negative data, of scandals brought him down. And, voters rejected Republicans in 2018. They defeated him in 2020. And in 2022, when he thrust himself in the middle of the midterms, Republicans also underperformed. It's only in 2024 that they did well. So I do think these things take a toll on Trump. It's just not really a toll that seems commensurate with the scale of the lies that he is telling. And that remains disheartening, I guess.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So going back to where we started at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Washington Post had some reporting about what's next for the agency. And they say it's unlikely that the White House will be able to truly manipulate the data, even if it wants to. I'm not trying to suggest that everything's going to magically be okay, but I guess what I'm asking is, do you see enough resilience left in our institutions that might get us through the rest of whatever comes next?
I think it really depends on the institution. I think that there is something to be said for the kind of resilience of something like BLS, but I worry about other parts of the government. I worry about for example, our hurricane forecasting capacities. I worry about weather forecasting. I worry about these things that are really specialized and that are not necessarily in sight, except when they are really very much in sight. And I think those things are being eroded, and there's scientific research being eroded, data gathering, and those things are going to be really hard to put back together. So these things that work in the everyday function of government, some of them may survive, but we're going to take some serious losses, and I don't know what the limit of politicization is for all of them.
We're trying to keep this to 1 week in Trump land, but even with that time constraint, there's stuff I haven't mentioned. For example, Attorney General Pam Bondi telling prosecutors they need to investigate Obama. President Trump has floated the idea on Truth Social that Obama should be tried and convicted for treason. the Office of the Special Counsel investigating Jack Smith, we're reaching this precipice where we're imagining the possibility of Trump using his executive power to attack his political enemies in ways that we haven't, I don't even imagined, really. How's the public, how is the media supposed to keep up with all of this when the volume of these attacks seems to be part of the strategy?
I think it's very hard to do. And I struggle with that too. And I try to think about them as a system rather than thinking about them as individual things. And I think that helps to keep an eye on it. But, so many of the examples you just cited there involve the justice system. And we've circled around this a couple of times. But, part of the idea of the justice system is that you can establish some sort of truth. And the goal is to establish some sort of truth. And Trump, when he is, for example, talking about Obama committing treason, is clearly not interested in truth. He's interested in scoring political points. He's interested in turning the justice system into something other than a machine for determining facts. And, that's really dangerous.
David Graham, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry, it's not more cheerful.
No, this is, it's a lot. It's crazy. David A. Graham is a staff writer at The Atlantic. He's also the author of The Project, How Project 2025 is Reshaping America. Speaking of people living in alternate realities, this week, host Anna Sale dives deep into the lives of the ultra-rich in a new Death, Sex, and Money episode. From underground bunkers to secret island compounds, Anna explores how America's elite manage to isolate themselves from the rest of the world and even sometimes from each other. Look for Death, Sex, and Money wherever you listen to your podcasts. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Anna Phillips, Madeline Ducharme, and Ethan Oberman. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate, and I'm Rob Gunther. You can find me at Blue Sky. I'm at OneRobGunther. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.